Hi, this is Anonymous Bells. I'm Megan Turner. I'm here with Colleen Alice, and we have a special guest today. We're going to be talking about titles. Colleen's going to introduce her real quick, and we'll go right into it.
Yes, we have with us today Jo Tyler. Jo Tyler is a queer poet, storyteller, and visual artist. A former Penn State professor and Fortune 500 vice president, Jo retired into the social vacuum of COVID-19 and returned to poetry after decades of writing prose in business and academia. Her work has appeared in Yellow Arrow Journal, Maryland Literary Review, and Gargoyle. So, Jo, we're so happy to have you with us
Great to be here.
today. Two of my favorite people in the Zoom room right now. And we know that you are passionate about titles. And so we want to pick your brain and hear why are you so passionate about titles and how they can be used in writing?
Sure. I got interested in titles back in the early 80s. I was living in Silicon Valley. I was in big business for the first time. I worked at Hewlett Packard. It was my first like grown-up job. And I didn't know anything about business. I had a degree in technical writing, and I landed in this business environment, and they were like speaking a language I didn't know. So I subscribed to the Wall Street Journal, and because I wanted to learn the words, so I could talk to these people. And the reporting back then, the Wall Street Journal was not the magazine that is the newspaper, quote unquote, that it is today. The writing in it was really very good, and they had some excellent titles. And here's the thing that drew me to titles and has kept me interested in titles all these decades. There was an article that was titled Crocodile Tears for Alligator Pears. And it was about the avocado glut in California and Mexico. It was a particularly good year for avocados. And we were like, I was living in California and we were eating like avocados. They were like 10 cents a piece. And we were eating them like crazy. We were having guacamole every night. And I was so drawn to this article. And I just thought Crocodile Tears for Alligator Pears just made me want to read it. I just thought whoever wrote this deserves for me to read all the way down to the very conclusion. And I did. And it was a really fun article that really explained the glut. And I thought titles are magical. You get the title right, and even people who are not normally interested would be drawn in. And since then, what I've realized, especially in the last 4 years when I've been working on poetry, is that a title helps your reader enter your work and understand your work, and ultimately, we hope it helps them love your work. And so I focused on titles a lot these past few years since I retired and since working on my MFA. And I developed a little taxonomy tool as part of my studies at Spalding. You want to see it?
Yes, we do.
Okay. All right, here we go. I'm going to share my screen just like that. And I'm going to put it into slideshow so it's a little cleaner. Okay. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Looks great.
Okay, great. All right. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to walk you through this. But the whole focus here is what's going to help your reader, a first-time reader. I like to think about the first-time reader. Titles can mean more on second pass or a third pass. And there are some titles that are especially like lucid and potent only after you've read the poem. Like you know this, right? You get to the bottom of the poem and you're like, what was that title? And you go back up and you're like, yes, that's great. But mostly I want my titles to do the work, the upfront work of really welcoming a reader across the threshold into the poem. And this tool, by the way, I'm field testing this tool, and it's worked with short story people and creative nonfiction essayists, and I have one novelist. I'm looking for more novelists to try it out. So I'm going to talk about poems specifically because that's what I write mostly, but you can apply it to any written work where you want to help set the expectations of the reader before they walk in. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit. We're going to kind of work visually from the outside in eventually. But first, I want to talk about these arrows in the middle. So what happened to me was, as I was doing research on titles, I read this article about strategic ambiguity in titling works of art and poetry and things like that. And I love this idea of what an ambiguous title could do, and it evokes mystery. So we see this on the right-hand side as you're looking at your screen. And I thought, well, what's at the other end of the continuum, right? And that's being super explicit. And so on the left-hand side, you're aiming for clarity. There's something you really want someone to understand when they go into the poem. And on the right side of this model, you're really trying to evoke a sense of wonder. Like, what is this? Ooh, what is this thing about? And then because I'm a business person, I wanted another axis, right? So I wanted a complete like 2x2 model. And so I deconstructed a lot of the work on titles, and I came up with this idea that the other axis moves from informational at the bottom, which is fact-driven, to evocative, which is feeling-driven or emotion-driven at the top. So what that means is when you look at a quadrant, say if you look at the top right-hand quadrant, which is labeled interpretive, that's a set of title elements that are sitting neatly between generating feelings and generating wonder, right? Between evocative and ambiguous. And those are interpretive titles, and that makes sense, right? That something that would evoke wonder would be a highly interpretive thing. So the next thing I did, after I got those arrows, the next thing I did was I came up with the questions, like a little thought starter prompt for each of the 4 quadrants. So if you look at, let's take that same interpretive quadrant in the upper right. The question is very simple, right? There's no magic in these. Is there anything you want to help your reader feel or wonder before they go into your poem or your real written work, whatever it might be? And so you start with that, like, do I want them to feel a certain way? Is there something that I want them to be really curious about, to feel a sense of uncertainty before they go into the poem? And then interpretive elements are the ones that are kind of labeled in there, evoking a concept or trying to create a mood or something that's destabilizing. And the destabilizing element here, this is my favorite quadrant, by the way, which is why I picked it as an example. The destabilizing element might happen when you get into the poem. So it might be a title that gets a reader thinking, oh, I know what this is about, right? But then they go in and they're like, whoa, baby, that's not what this is about at all, not one bit. And now I'm surprised and I'm curious, and I'm gonna keep reading, even if it's a epic like lyric poem. I'm gonna keep going. So these little simple questions are meant to be thought starters. The tool doesn't actually generate the title. It's not AI. Thank you, good Lord. So you still have to do the work, but the idea here is that you can use these 4 little questions around the outside to either eliminate a quadrant or come to the realization that something from that quadrant would be particularly useful. And I think that the other thing I want to say about this model is you'll notice that there's dash lines everywhere. And that's because a title might actually draw on 3 of these quadrants at the same time. The untitled quadrant or a sparse title stands alone, right? If you don't title your poem, it's not going to draw on any of the other quadrants because it's untitled. And if you give it a sparse title, like untitled, right? Your poem is no longer untitled because you've titled it untitled. So it's a sparse title. It doesn't give you any information except that the writer doesn't want you to have any expectations. They want you to go in sort of tabula rasa, right? Just blank slate. What's here, right? You've got to trust that there's going to be something in there for
Mm.
you. And I don't believe in, like, if a poem's untitled, you should think of the first line of the poem as the title. I don't think Emily Dickinson wanted that to happen, you know. I think she wanted to have her poems untitled, so she didn't title them, and the first line is the first line. That's all. So anyway, I feel strongly about some of these things. But anyway, that's how it works. You work from the questions first, and then when you think, yeah, there is something I want people to feel or wonder, or there's something I really want them to know. I really want them to know what the setting is. I really want them to know that this is a poem where the narrator is lying in a hammock looking at the stars. That would be an additive poem in the upper left. So once you think that, then you can think, well, I'm going to have some additive elements in my title, but I might equally add in some interpretive or some referential elements as well. I'm a big fan of monumental titles that do like a lot of preparation work for the reader, and then the poem can rely on having that work done. But monumental titles aren't right for every poem, and some poems should be untitled, and some poems just need a single word. So, but that's part of what's fun about it. So anyway, that's sort of the model. And if people want to take a screenshot of that, they're welcome to it. It will eventually be free on my website, jotylerpoet.com. It's not there yet, but I'm going to do like a little lecturette on it, and record it and have the model there so people can hear me talk about it in a little bit more depth and with some examples. But that's
great.
By the end of 2026, I plan to have that up and running on my website. That's my timeline. So do you guys have any questions before I unshare my screen and we just talk more generally?
Oh, I just want to say thank you. I think there's so much great stuff here, and it's a great resource. And it's like almost mean that we asked you to talk about this for 5 minutes, because I know that the three of us, could talk about this for like another hour and go over even more examples. So we're gonna just restrain ourselves here. But
yes, we can still do that, but over wine, I think.
yeah.
Or
But
for you, a beer.
oh, thank you. Yes,
For
but
Megan
like
and I, maybe we'll have wine.
just this whole approach and the thoughtfulness and thinking about what a reader needs and like pros and cons of different quadrants. It's for me, it makes a lot of sense and it's really super helpful. So thank you.
Great.
Yeah, I think I know a lot of poets, and I feel like for them the title is so important, because it's like a lot of times it's like, how do you interpret this poem without the title?
Yeah.
But Colleen and I mean, we're going to go more into this, but we both work with a lot of writers, and I feel like that one of the big questions that comes up a lot is like, well, how do you feel about my title? And I think a lot of them want me to like title it for them. And then I get like a long list of title ideas, and they're all like, these aren't quite right, but I'm going to write your title for you. So, and I like will try to push them in a certain direction, but yeah, it's like it feels like something they kind of have to think out on their own, you know?
Yeah. I think there are a couple of characters involved. You know, the poem itself wants something, right? The poem is asking for something, but the reader is also asking for something, and the poet is sort of the medium, you know, between them. They're sort of the connecting tissue for making that decision. I don't think you get out of it, you know, unless you're willing to go the AI route, which, you know, a pox on you if you are.
Which isn't necessarily going to be better either, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've never tried it actually, because I don't want my stuff in AI, so
Right.
I've never put my poetry into AI. I don't believe in that.
I think this is a good place. It's really helpful to have it kind of broken down like this. And I'm going to take a screenshot myself.
Yeah, absolutely do. I can also send you guys, a copy of this slide. It's no problem.
So yeah, let's go into, I mean, I guess you can unshare whenever you're ready, but we can go into some of the questions we have. And I think Colleen, I'll ask the first one, and then we can kind of, And so what kind of advice do you have for a writer who's stuck and they don't know what to title their book?
Use my tool. Start with the outside questions and work your way in.
Yeah, I mean, so like, for example, I've had an author or multiple authors where they like come up with a title and they think it's really good and it's not doing the work they think it's doing. And I feel like I don't want to like offend them and be like, this title sucks.
Right.
But I'm like, well, like, you know, brainstorm a few ideas, let it sit for a few days, tell me, you know, but they're like throwing out like hundreds of titles at me. And I'm like, wait. So I don't know if that's stuck. It's more like they don't have the right title, you know? So,
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I guess besides using that, your method, is there a way to like say they use that method and they've come up with 50 titles and they're all like kind of questionable?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, having people read your work, is really important. And one of the things that I've done when I've been really stuck on a title is I'll have some of my readers read the poem without the title at all. And I'll say to them, what do you wish you knew before you read the poem? And they'll say, well, geez, I didn't know there was going to be a snake, and
Yeah.
then I make a decision. Well, do I want them to know in advance that there was going to be a snake, or do I like that the snake is a surprise, right? And then if I want it to be a surprise, then I get to think about, well, is there some kind of metaphor that I could use in the title to invoke the snake, but come at it kind of sideways, right? So when I get information from a reader who's read without the title, then that gives me like a fertile field, to sort of, what's my metaphor here, to plow. Right? I get a bunch of elements now that I can play with. They're like new building blocks, right? That I maybe wouldn't have come up with on my own. So that's one technique. If you have people whose intellect you admire, and they're willing to play with you like that. Everybody deserves readers like that, I think. I feel lucky to have them. And I think it can just open up like a new portal into title possibilities that you couldn't imagine before.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. I think I tend towards like vague and the kind of more interpretive title from your design, you know, and I've realized that's like sometimes they want a little bit of, yeah, like a preview in some way or some idea of like what is this book going to be about? And so I've been trying to like think, okay, maybe I can help the reader a little more. Yeah.
There's also this interesting thing about whether titles come first or last in the creative process, and sometimes a title acts as a muse. Like I'll get an idea for a title. I'll hear a snippet in conversation, and I'm like, I want to make a poem about that, right? And that's going to be the title. And maybe it starts off as a title and it doesn't end up as the title, but it works as it sort of greases the skids, for me to actually write the poem. And I have learned to not trust those titles, and Colleen, you're one of the people who sort of taught me this about, the scaffolding that you start with at the beginning of a poem isn't necessarily stuff you need once the poem is written. It just helps you get into it. And so I always, in revision, on my revision checklist, titles is one of the first things that I play with, and see if I really want that title that was kind enough to be the entry point into the poem. Sometimes I want to write a poem about something, I have no idea what to title it, and the poem tells me, right, as I'm writing it. I'm still suspicious of it, right? I still now go back, and especially now that I have this tool and I like really know it, it's easy for me to go back and to just check out those questions. And I try to put myself in the position of the reader. I know what I want the reader to get from a poem, and I know they won't always get it. No matter what I do, no matter how good the title is, no matter how good the poem is, they're going to interpret it some other way. But what can I do with the title to help foster the interpretation of the poem that I think really matters, and so when I lecture about this, I have a handout that has a lot of examples, and even though referential and additive titles don't interest me as much, they can be so useful in guiding a reader's expectations, putting them in a place especially a setting, so that you don't have to do that in the poem. The poem doesn't have to do any of that work. And they come in knowing they're going to be in a cornfield in Iowa. Great. That's great. Now my poem doesn't have to mention cornfields or corn or Iowa or anything about that.
You just hope that's where the reader wants to be, right?
Well, if they don't want to be, they're not going to read the poem. And
That's true.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I would think it's like a little different for novels too, because like for me, I feel like sometimes I'm like 50 pages in and then I'm like, okay, now I got to think of the time, but yeah.
Well, and especially if you're sending like advanced chapters for submission, for an editor or an agent to consider, I would think, you've got to take a flyer. But I still think, I mean, the novelist that used this tool changed her title on the basis of the work. She's not done yet, so she may change it again many times. I don't know, but I am interested. I do think novels are different, and I think it works for short stories. It works for essays. I'm convinced of that. Novels may need their own interpretation of the tool.
And I think too, what this makes me think of is genre constraints really can affect what a novelist can title, because there are different expectations depending on the genre that you're writing in. So, that's one thought, and maybe that's why partly it's so hard to title a novel, because not only is it so expansive, but you have to think about, like, is it a Western? I can't call it, like, I don't know. Westerns have very particular titles, right?
Right.
Style of titles.
So romance novels too, right? Like all the genres have, yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, that's not a world that I'm familiar to being constrained.
It's a good place to start it though, because you have to have some sort of like, how am I gonna even go about this process, so.
Well, and you don't get as much of a chance for a monumental title with a novel because it's got to fit on the spine, So, you can have line breaks in your title if you want, I suppose. When you're a poet, you have a lot of latitude, but we don't have to worry about the spine. Until we name the collection.
Wasn't Dave Edgar's the author who all of his titles are just like on the whole cover? Like he just starts the book on the cover and is like,
that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I don't like that. I think that's bold.
Yeah, that's pretty monumental. Oh, Jo, we could talk to you for so much longer. Is there anything else? I think you've shared some really good advice. Using your tool if you're stuck, playing with different titles, giving it to readers with different titles, seeing how it hits them. Is there anything else that we didn't kind of mention yet that you want to make sure to cover?
I just would say that don't overlook the title. Don't get in a habit of titling your poems with the last line, because it's full circle and you like the zen of it, or don't always use monumental poems. This is me, don't always use monumental poems just because you love them, because they're a little poem on their own. Try to, especially like if you're doing a collection, you really want your titles to be embody a good variety of titles. You don't want to be stuck in a particular habit, and don't overlook the opportunity that a title presents you. That title space above the work is waiting for the right thing, the right kind of welcome mat. I hate these metaphors, actually. A title is a hat. So a title is a welcome mat, but it is the threshold that the reader passes through, and it's a real opportunity for the poet and the poem to get that reader ready so that they can have like a really full-bodied and rich experience of the poem. So if you treat it like a hat, it can be anything. You just put it on, it's at the end, and as long as the color matches the rest of your outfit, it's okay. But it can be so much more than that. Don't lose the opportunity that the title space provides. I think that's my parting shot.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I think people like put I think the stakes feel really high sometimes. And so I think that's where some of the stress comes for me, like with some of the writers that I work with, like, oh my God, like what if this is the wrong title and throws off the whole thing,
Yeah.
But I think you've given us some sort of tools and
great.
and some ideas of how to approach it so that it doesn't maybe feel as scary. Colleen.
Cool. Cool. That's
Yeah,
great.
this is a slightly therapeutic for me because I gotta say, if I start a longer work and I don't have a title, I am very panicked. I do feel like I'm gonna get it wrong if I don't know it right away.
And
Mm.
yeah, Colleen and I have like texted back and forth about titles, like 3 days, 4 days of titles, just like texting each other titles.
I know because I'm so scared of getting to the end and then realizing it doesn't have a title, and I can't call the novel Untitled.
No,
At least I
probably
don't think I
not.
can.
Probably not. That's not going to
So
be a big seller.
it gets really anxiety producing because you want to get it right. It's so
Yeah,
important.
yeah,
Yeah, and I would say like I think with poetry it feels, I mean, I don't think you can throw it away like you're saying, but I think with a novel or a longer piece it really feels like maybe the stakes get elevated in some way. And you're
yeah,
like, oh my
yeah.
God, this is going to be on the front cover, you know?
Right, right. Well, it's like
So,
naming a child, right? They're gonna,
yeah, you don't want to go the wrong way, and then you're like, oh,
yeah,
now my
yeah,
child
because
has this crazy name.
they're gonna live with it on the playground, and your book has to live with it on the shelf. So,
Oh my God.
yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big
It's a
deal,
big
these
deal.
things. But it's also fun, right? It's when you hit it and you know it, you're like, sweet, that's the spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think what you said is true of like the varying it and like I've definitely had like all one word titles and that's just like, oh wait, that doesn't work as a collection
right,
when you
right.
put them
Yeah,
together.
yeah. It's like
Agreed.
someone's hopping on one foot for your collection. Yeah.
Well, Joe, before we let you go, let's restate your website. And then do you have your book nearby that you can show viewers your book that came out?
Jeez.
Oh, no, sorry. You can just say, no, Colleen, I don't have it nearby. This was a multiple choice question. You can find Jo online at her website, Jo Tyler Poet. This brilliant taxonomy, I've named it the Jo Tyler Title Taxonomy
Wow.
2026
Wow.
I think that's a mouthful, Colleen. I don't know.
TM
It's a
trademark.
lot of T's,
I
right?
know, that's why I like
So
it.
here is my chapbook, Rooms for Love. Let me
Okay.
see if I can get it in a sweet spot. There we
Oh,
go.
that good. That looks good. Yeah.
Is it backwards for you
No, it's
guys?
perfect.
Is it? Okay. Yeah, this is a chapbook that came out earlier this year. Um, it's a quirky little thing. And all of you can order it from my website, jotylerpoet.com, all one word. Um, and all of the proceeds from this chapbook are going to a local women's shelter called House of Ruth, Maryland, here in Baltimore, where I live. They're an excellent women's shelter who do a very good job of providing women who are escaping domestic violence with rooms for love. So they're getting all the money. And we've sold over 100 copies and I've raised over $1,000 so far. And that's poetry money, right?
Love that.
That's $1,000 of poetry money, which is like $1 million in
Basically. That's just poet math, okay?
right. So yeah, it's available through my website. I have a link. I have a link to the publisher, and you can order directly from them. And the proceeds will all go to House of Ruth.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being so generous with like all that you know and all your poetic experiences. Yeah, we really appreciate it.
I was delighted to be here. I was delighted to be here.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.